Regarding Men, Episode 13, The Sliming of ICMI.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul Elam with a Voice for Men, and this is Regarding Men. And of course, I am with, as always, the wonderful Janice Fiamingo, formerly, or I guess still or formerly of the University of Ottawa,
Still.
and, and Tom Golden from menaregood.com. And we have all been slimed by The Guardian, or at least the attempt was there. And yes, Tom, even though they didn't mention you, you too were slimed, because this was addressing us as a group as much as it was individuals. Anyway, if you look below in the description area, you're going to see a link to an article in The Guardian attacking British MP Phil Davis for coming to the United States to speak at the International Conference on Men's Issues this coming August in Chicago, Illinois, where all three of us will be speaking. And they're attacking him by associating him with men's rights activist, cherry mining quotes. Of course, this is a routine, we started seeing in full force back when Elliot Rodger went on a killing spree, and Daily Dot authored that piece saying that he was an MRA, that he was one of us. And the media, the fake news media, has been doing this ever since. And this time they've attacked me, they've attacked Janice. Like I said, they gave Tom a break, but his time will too come. There's no doubt about it. Let me say a couple of things personally before we proceed with the discussion, if you guys don't mind. I've been a provocateur for 10 years, and it's been intentional. The reason that I have done this, to me, is obvious. There was 90 to 100 years of attempts by men, all the way back to Vienna in 1929, where they attempted to have a men's rights conference, excuse me, and after protests, the government pulled the plug on it because it offended women. And it has been that way ever since. And of course, everybody knows who Warren Farrell is. And if you look back into the 70s at Asa Baber and others that were writing about these issues, they were criticized, condemned. E. Belfort Bax wrote about this all the way back to the late 1800s. And every time there was polite, honest, look, I just want to sit down and discuss these issues. I want the world to discuss these issues. The world responded either by shrugging or attacking every time. When I decided to get into men's issues in a public way, I look at that and ask myself, do I want to be the next guy that says something that nobody pays attention to? And the answer was no. And my understanding of social movements informs me that they all begin with anger. Look at the early days of feminism and some of the rhetoric that came from that. You look at the early days of the civil rights movements in the United States. There was buildings burning, blood in the streets. Needless to say that the rhetoric coming from it was very violent. And it was trying to address a problem that society did not want to address. The wholesale discrimination, the mistreatment of African Americans and other minorities in this country that was very real, and that was ignored until the anger started being expressed in a very definite way. So I took that knowledge and I spoke provocatively, but I will say for the record, as we get into this Guardian article, I've never said anything that I don't think is morally defensible. Never. I would not say anything that I thought was morally indefensible. The primary attack vehicle that they tend to use is an article from way back, 8, 9, 10 years ago, where I responded to a Jezebel.com article where the women there were glorifying and celebrating their physical abuse of men.
Right.
It was not satire. And the bottom line of the writer who wrote that piece on it was that all we can say is you better not fuck with us. the arrogance behind the violent abuse of men was there too. So I wrote a response piece, a satire piece, saying we're going to have a Bash a Violent Bitch Month, where I was talking about, underneath the satire, the importance of men understanding that there's nothing wrong with them defending themselves. I mean, that's one of our basic rights, is to defend life and liberty in this country and in many others. It's recognized that if you're under attack, you can defend yourself. And so with that, I would happy to say, at least philosophically, I celebrate Bash a Violent Bitch Month every October during Domestic Violence Month. And I will be celebrating it again. As a matter of fact, I will say today, I'm declaring today as Bash a Violent Bitch Day. And the message to women is clear. If you want to maintain physical safety, and I assume that most women do, don't beat up on people. Don't hit people. Don't assault their physical space and violate their rights. And they are far less likely to respond by violating yours. And I still maintain that that response is not a violation of the abuser's rights. It is a morally defensible response. Now, we can have a conversation about that. Whether that is morally defensible or not is something that we all should be open to discussing. But to brand me as an abusive person because I advocate for the right of individuals to defend themselves is simply crazy. But that's the society that we live in, and that was the attack. And then we come, Janice, can you talk some about the attack that was made on you?
Well, yeah, I was delighted to see myself there in such august company. They didn't bother really, too much with me. I only got one sentence and 2.5 lines, but it does say a Canadian speaker, Janice Fiamingo, has sent recent tweets. I mean, talk about poor journalism. Oh, let's not investigate this person at all, but let's just look at a couple of her recent tweets. Except that I didn't send any of these tweets. I have no idea what the person is referring to. This is outright lying, outright fabrication. It says, although it's very vague, has sent recent tweets in support of white nationalist extremists.
Janice.
No idea who these people are. I am not a white nationalist extremist. I'm opposed to all race nationalisms. I don't know who these people are. Maybe I've tweeted in support of Tommy Robinson, who is not a white
President Trump
extremist. I mean, I have no idea who they're thinking of here. And then it goes on to say that I backed the conspiracy theory that the Notre Dame fire could have been the work of Islamist attackers. That's as far as it goes. As we said before this started, it is not a conspiracy theory to say that something could have been something, but I didn't even say that. Given that Islamists, given that Islamists have burned churches all across France,
Hundreds,
or attacked them in other ways, it wouldn't be a particularly bizarre thing to say it could have been. But I didn't say that, and I would encourage anyone who cares, who's worried about this, to please look at my tweets. There is nothing. They're all very sober kinds of things. And at one point I said that we may never know what happened. And I tweeted an article saying that there is no reason to trust the French government to tell us whether it was arson or not, because the French government has explicitly obfuscated about attacks in the past.
yes.
So
well, that would put you in company, Janice, with several thousand people every weekend wearing yellow vests that also do not trust the French government. There's a lot of people that don't trust the French government.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So I have known for years that journals like The Guardian distort the truth all the time and outright lie. But it is salutary to see the lies made about oneself personally and to realize that this is how low they go, that they just absolutely make things up, hoping that Some people will be turned off, hoping that the target of the defamation will, I don't know what, will turn against their friends, will come out with a big apology and disavow, will start to be afraid to say anything. I mean, one of the principles that I have always, or at least since I started speaking publicly, I believe that saying things, even things that are unpleasant, that people might not like, that people might disagree with, that speaking the truth is itself really, really liberating for the person who does it and for others.
Yes.
And but when you get this kind of smear job done on you, the first reaction for a lot of people is, I think, to think, oh wow, it's not worth it. So now, because my first thought was, now I'm going to go to that conference and Philip Davies is going to be there, and he may or may not ever meet me, but he's going to, oh yeah, Janice Fiamingo, that was the one mentioned, who's the, who supports extremists and spreads conspiracy theories. He doesn't have time to research me. He may not actually believe it, but the taint of these supposedly awful things will still be there a little bit, even if he doesn't fully believe it. And that's a really horrible feeling. And the other people that I might respect, or that I would like, that I don't even know, like, I'm not so much worried about my friends and acquaintances, but the people I don't even know, they'll see me at that conference. Oh yeah, that was that one. I guess she's a real racist or whatever. It is a really horrible feeling, and there's no way you can defend yourself against it. I mean, I can deny it or whatever, which I do, but they may never hear my denial, and so it's a very effective strategy to make people afraid and defensive and demoralized, and it is really disgusting. So this is what The Guardian does. When a group of people want to get together, men and women of goodwill want to get together and talk about men's issues like suicide and homelessness and fatherlessness and its effects, and men who've been denied the right to parent their own children, and all the terrible things, the suffering that we talk about, and who want to talk about what real gender equality looks like, and they have to slander and slur and smear. Words do not express my disgust. It's unbelievable.
Yes, well said.
Absolutely.
And the fact is, of course, as anybody would learn who comes to a ICMI conference, this could not be further from the truth.
I know.
Every ICMI I've been at, I haven't been at them all, unfortunately, the mood in those rooms, it's so positive, it's so diverse, and I'm not just talking about racial and gender diversity. In terms of thought, there are people there. We had male feminists at the last ICMI conference. We've had quite traditionalist, anti-feminist women. I mean, we had many speakers, some on the left, some on the right, and it doesn't matter to people. Everyone gets a respectful hearing. There's respectful disagreement, but it's all in a very friendly way, because we have at least some shared interest in saying the truth and finding out the truth about men's issues. And it's a really wonderful place. There's no fearfulness, there's no backstabbing, there's no slandering of women, there's no hatred whatsoever. And so it's just sad to see that newspapers like The Guardian are so against that wonderful gathering of people, that they tell these kinds of lies about those who are involved in the movement.
I think go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, I agree completely. It's just, if you've ever been to one of these, I mean, the whole atmosphere is acceptance and enjoyment and taking in the data that's presented. That's what it's all about. And people have a good time doing it.
Yeah.
And it's a nice gathering. And you're right. There's a lot of different ways of thinking. There's a lot of different colors of skin. There's a lot of different, there's males and females, and everybody gets along.
Yeah.
It's like it couldn't be farther from the truth. It simply couldn't be.
Yeah.
Which makes it's a head scratcher to the nth degree. It's just
Yeah.
absolutely nutty.
Yeah.
I want to add this too. It's really, and I know we all know this, this is not really a head scratcher. The left has a narrative.
Yeah.
And that narrative is that men are oppressors, women are the oppressed, historically speaking, that we live in a patriarchal society where men benefit and gain at the expense of women. And anything outside that narrative is strictly forbidden. It is absolutely,
Right.
I mean, this is the core of identity politics. And what so much of the modern men's literature asserts, one is it outside the identity politics narratives. And it talks about, we talk more about personal accountability than any other social movement I've ever seen. If it was about looking at the truth, if the media wanted to look at the truth, they would see in the 10 years of work I put online that I'm much harder on men than I ever have been on women, and that I hold their feet to the fire to be responsible for their decisions, that to not play victim, that they make choices in life.
Right.
And of course, they're never going to credit me for that, because it's really not about what I say or what Janice says, or whether, she believed in a conspiracy theory or not. They make that stuff up as they go along because Janice represents a threat. And now what we're seeing with the presence of people like Phil Davies, what we saw with Mark Latham in Australia, with Ann Cools from Canada speaking at that there is beginning to get a representation of this kind of thinking. The red pill ideology, if you will, is starting to creep into mainstream politics. And that has got to terrify them. They hate the idea of politicians standing up saying, yes, there's really a problem with men's suicide. There's a problem with the way our boys are treated in school. There's a problem with our family courts. And on down the line to every one of these almost innumerable issues that we all know about. They don't want that conversation to happen. And when MPs, when senators start showing up and taking political risks in order to speak about these issues, that really, I think, is what sets up. That's, to me, is what the Guardian article is about more than anything else. Really, some powerful people are starting to get on this bandwagon. We better stop it. So what do? They try to shame Phil Davis into not appearing. They try to associate him with cherry-picked quotes from 10 years ago that are taken totally out of context from how they were said, and try to smear him with that like a scapegoat, like smearing the blood on the goat and sending it into the desert. Get out of here. We're seeing that happen. And it's because what we do terrifies them. It's not because they think we're wrong. They just think we're against, at least that's my belief. I'm probably more cynical than others. I don't think necessarily that people are, that these people on the left really believe that we're evil people. I think they just see us as a political threat and they want to do something about it.
Yeah.
To me, the head scratcher is not that the left or the feminists have a very, extreme way of looking at things, and they will not vary from that. The head scratcher is, how did they get Congress, the legislators, and the media to be a monolith, to just be one voice? How did that happen? And to me, that's the head scratcher. Isn't there someone in the media that would speak up for men? There's not. There's almost no one. Tucker Carlson is one who's starting to speak up a little bit, but he's it. It's about it. So the media and the legislators, how did that happen? It's crazy.
He's it, and unfortunately, he still has a tendency, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Tucker Carlson. I love what he does, but he still has a tendency to go back to that old line that absent fathers are all about men who are abandoning their families and to man up and come back. He doesn't recognize yet that these are mostly men that have been driven out of their families.
Really?
But he's doing better than most. But that's been the dilemma, I think, all along, is that from the left we get feminism and from the right we get mindless chivalry.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Well said.
Lot of white knighting and gynocentrism.
Yes.
Happens to be anti-feminist. Yeah, and I think, part of the answer, it is so frustrating because this is something that I've thought about so much with academia. Why is it that in this place where people have these incredibly protected jobs, you cannot lose your job unless it's something really, really egregious, and yet you couldn't find greater uniformity even amongst people who could lose their job, at any moment. It's incredible. But what it is, and it's one of these cases where if everybody would speak up, if one day everybody, all the people who reject the lockdown of cultural Marxist feminist ideology, if they would all speak with one voice and say, nope, that's not me. I believe other things, and I don't want to have to pretend I believe this. Nothing could be done to these people because they would be a mighty army, but they never do speak with one voice, and it's perfectly legitimate for people to feel afraid to speak out on their own, because what happens to them is you get called, as Labour MP Wes Streeting, bless his heart, said about people who would attend and speak at ICMI, at best a gathering of insecure and sexist man babies.
Yeah, man babies.
Thanks for that. What a sophisticated analysis, Wes. I'm glad you really read a lot of the literature and provided this kind of incisive analysis. And more worrying, of course, more worrying than that, I don't know what he'd say about all the women that attend, includes speakers with a whole host of extremist views. Yes, such as the view that men and women should be equal before the law. Oh dear. But this kind of vile slander, this is what gets flung at anyone who does dissent from the reigning narrative. And so people just decide it's too risky. There's always a reason not to speak, because they tell themselves they can do more good. If they remain in their position, they're afraid that they're going to be in some way discredited. I mean, that's the thing. I can do more good if I just stay quiet about all of these various issues. But of course you can't, because then you end up, afraid to say boo. And you can ultimately then never speak outside of the narrative.
So Janice, your conclusion is that pretty much it's fear that keeps academia on a level space where only one view can be voiced.
And it's a legitimate fear, because those on the other side are ruthless. They are vicious. They will destroy anyone. They will do exactly like this. They will tell any lies, and they isolate their target, and they make sure that no one will defend that person. And often that's the end of the person.
It is relational aggression.
I was just going to say that. This is Mean Girls.
Yes, it is. It's Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. The gossip, the use of social media to spread the hatred, to spread the lies. The person can within one day find himself, and it often is a man, though sometimes it's a woman too, but he'll find himself with nobody to stand for him. People will literally turn their backs.
Really?
I've heard about this happening. Literally turn their backs in elevators.
Oh, God.
On. Why? What terrible thing did he do? Because as one of the attendees at this conference is a Professor Franson, I think. I'm forgetting his name now. And all he did in retirement, he started to investigate male positive ideology and movements. In his retirement, he was a respected medievalist. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Honey Badgers did a fascinating interview with him, and they went after him, his fellow medievalists. And before this time, he'd been considered cutting edge, doing really important scholarship. He got interested in the men's movement. That was it. They just viciously unpersoned him, and that's what they do every single time.
Unpersoned.
Guilty of wrongthink. Unfortunately, I want to say this, I just got to say it, aside from the fact that, Janice, I'm sorry, but you make a really crappy man baby, as far as that goes. This also goes into exactly what I think, Tom, you raised the issue of there being one unified voice.
Yes.
Both sides of the political party. Of course, that's gynocentrism.
Right.
It's the bifurcation. At the root is gynocentrism, and then feminism and traditionalism are really just, the different trajectory of that. But the main controlling elements, one, like Janice just pointed out, fear. There's being socially ostracized if you speak out about these things. The other thing, which is what the idiot that made the statement about man babies was trying to do, is shame. And unfortunately, you can control men with shame.
Yes.
They can be rather easily controlled. It's a lot better if a woman shames them. It's a lot more effective, I should say, if a woman shames them than if a man does, because we are much more likely to resist the coercion of men than we are the coercion of women.
Right.
But shame is at the core of this. And this is unfortunately why you see so many efforts to rise up and address a core issue of gynocentrism is always beaten back with shame. It's why we've had a men's movement for 100 years with so little traction. And until we get people that are willing, they've been doing this to us to me for 10 years. I've been attacked over and over and over again. For what it's worth to anybody, I gave up on any notion of shame a long time ago. I don't have it, not for them. I can feel guilt over mistakes in my life, but I'm not going to allow hateful, vicious ideologues to shame me into silence.
Good.
And we need a lot of people that are not going to do that to make this thing get more traction. And it appears to be happening. By the way, folks, the event, there's less than 10 hotel rooms left.
Wow.
For the conference. If you go to icmi.info or follow the link below, you'll see tickets are selling like hotcakes. Almost all the rooms are gone. Tommy Sotomayor is going to be there speaking. Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, the incredible Janice Fiamingo, which is really better than the first two that I mentioned. There is a ton of great people. Phil Davies from the United Kingdom, Mike Buchanan's going to be there. If you haven't done this, because one of the things that I think Janice talked about was the magical environment of ICMIs, and it is. There's something magical about it. And I think part of that magic is the absence of shame. It's a bunch of people with similar ideas, able to look each other in the eye, spend time in the same room, and not look over their shoulder while they're talking. And that is a remarkable event in my book. And these people only make me more determined.
Has there ever been, ahead of one of the ICMIs, a major article by a paper like The Guardian of this sort? Do you know? I know there was a lot of controversy about ICMI 2014.
Oh yeah, Time magazine came out with a hit piece similar to The Guardian. I think Washington Post. There were several.
All negative, except for USA Today had a somewhat positive article, as I remember.
Yes, and that was Glenn Reynolds who did that.
He's so good. Yeah, I was going to try to spin it that this meant we'd come to a new, level of I don't know what.
I think that's true.
Mainstream prominence or something. But yeah, maybe.
Well, they're figuring out, I think, that, back in 2014 we did this. There was a slew of articles. There's going to be more articles about this one. Trust me, there already has been. We just mentioned the Guardian piece. There's a couple of others. I'll try to dig up the links to put in the description area. But we're going to see more, because what happened is they came out attacking us in 2014, and all it did was increase our profile and increase traffic to A Voice for Men and make the conferences better known. So they tried a couple of years of keeping their mouths shut and trying to ignore us, hoping we would go away. That didn't work. So now they're coming back on the attack again. And I've got news for them. Attack, don't attack, it doesn't matter. Resistance is futile.
Amen.
Yeah. So shall we give our awards, or?
Ooh.
Why not? Tom? Who gets the flying puta, Tom Golden?
Oh, the Buddha today. I think she is given to the writer of that article. Is that who we're giving it to?
Yeah, good old Peter Walker. I didn't know who you were before now, and now I know
Walker.
that you're lousy,
Now is Peter
slanderous
Flyer.
journalist.
You can see him go to, oh, Peter. Oh.
Oh my God, am I having to resist saying something about that man's name? First,
Go ahead.
Anyway.
Go ahead.
No, I just won't do that because I
Say
don't
it,
want to be
folks.
misquoted, and I'm all scared of what the media will say about it.
But Peter deserves it. I mean, that kind of article, that kind of sludge,
Terrible.
where you slime people like Janice and Paul, who you can tell from today's show, that these are not people who are,
Oh, by the way, I never got an email from Peter before that was published to verify anything. Janice, I'm assuming you didn't either?
Certainly not.
Oh, no, you mean they didn't even investigate the sources or the, oh.
Yeah. Well,
What a
I've written explaining that they were wrong, and I've had no response. So,
Right.
and I'm going to keep on writing and asking them for their public retraction. But do you think they'll give it?
No,
Nope.
purely to create a narrative.
They'll say you've initiated a harassment campaign against them to silence them, the poor baby.
What gets me is that when we talk about feminism, we write articles about feminism, we tell the truth. In fact, we only tell a fraction of what's really true. And it's just completely different,
Yeah. No, they're not interested.
So who gets the humanitarian?
Well, we think it should go to Philip
Tom,
Davis.
they're gonna. Philip Davis, all right.
Yeah,
A man with courage.
yes, good on him to have
Good
the
on him,
incredible
indeed.
courage of his convictions.
Wow.
The stalwart fortitude to bear
can't
up
wait.
under all this onslaught and to still pursue his genuine commitment to
Yes.
next human rights. He's a really admirable man.
Can't wait to
He
shake
is,
his hand.
indeed. I had the pleasure of meeting him in 16 in London, and I tell you what, he's a one-man force. He is. You can tell just getting in his presence that he's a powerful man, and he won't retreat for anything. He deserves that humanitarian award 10 times over. He really does.
We'll give him 10.
All right, we'll give him 10 of them.
Yeah.
And we'll increase his salary.
Abundantly.
Philip Davies for Prime Minister.
There you go.
Yes.
God, wouldn't that be a trip? Oh, jeez.
Yes, it would.
So we finished?
I think we are.
I think we are.
I think we are. So I guess we'll turn the thing off. Men are good.
Are they really?
I think so.
Yeah,
Today,
I think you're right.
yesterday, and tomorrow.
Yep.
We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.